The timeline taught us a lot of really cool things about the zombie storyline, and we were able to fill in a lot of holes within our understanding of the story, specifically on everybody's favorite map, Tranzit. For example, we learned when Tranzit finally took place, which I'm sure many of you who've especially been on the channel for a long time know this has been a hard-fought battle of mine. We also learned what the origin of the denizens and the Avogadro are. So there was a lot we learned, but there's still one more remaining question on Tranzit. And it's everybody's semi-sentient bus driver, Ted. What's going on here? Because Ted seems to have been neglected by the timeline. How hard would it have been to have just put on the timeline, Broken Arrow creates Ted so they can travel around to their many facilities? Why exactly was Ted, this very advanced robot, ignored from the timeline? Well, I think Ted holds many secrets, and there's a lot of interesting quotes that come from Ted if you listen to him. Some are just pretty hilarious, others are actually really interesting. He talks about many different sites that he stops on along his route, for example, Dulce Base.
Now approaching tunnel entrance for Dulce Base.
Dulce Base was this alleged joint project between aliens and humans, most likely I guess the United States, and they had built an underground base in the border of Colorado and New Mexico in a town called Dulce. And this was popularized by a businessman, Paul Benowitz, in the year 1979. He claimed to pick up a lot of electrocommunications from an alien aircraft or something like that. This was then popularized by the UFO communities in the late 80s and the early 90s. There is also Deep Spring's gravitational anomaly, which Ted brings up.
Please gather all top secret files and disembark for Deep Spring's gravitational anomaly.
This is a really interesting site because it's supposedly another underground facility that's holding aliens. There's this triangle surrounding the Nevada test site, and the theory goes that Majestic 12, which many of you guys may remember from the original Black Ops 1 terminal, installed this electromagnetic triangle in the Nevada test site. And not much is known about it. It's real big in the conspiracy theory world, but there's believed to be an underground base holding aliens, and they're doing all sorts of top secret research, which is interesting for a robot who's doing public transportation to know.
Attention passengers, please activate clean suits and disembark for Mount Weather.
Ted also brings up Mount Weather, which is a very interesting place because it's a massive relocation site for both civilians and the military in case there was to ever be a natural disaster, potentially say a nuclear war. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this place, especially surrounding FEMA and the belief that FEMA would become this shadow government should martial law have ever been enacted and people need to enter this facility. Either way, Ted knows a lot of secret information, and there's plenty more. If you dive into some of Ted's quotes, he talks about all sorts of areas that are littered in conspiracy theories and other interesting things. And what Treyarch likes to do is pick and pull from these different conspiracy theories and then bring them into their game. We can already see with places like Deep Spring's gravitational anomaly how we can easily fit into the zombie storyline, especially when you consider that we already have a lot of information on Majestic 12 hidden within the Black Ops 1 terminals. And there's also another interesting thing to consider about Ted. Ted is also being kept in Zero Base, and when you look in Zero Base, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in Zero Base. You have a copy of a staff, you have the golden rod, and then there's Ted. It's like playing a game of one of these things is not like the other, where almost everything in that room is a very important artifact. And then there's our quirky bus driver from the map Tranzit. Maybe Treyarch included them just for fun, or maybe he's actually a little bit more important than you might think. Maybe, just maybe, he has a lot of deep secrets hidden within him that could be useful to hold on to should we ever need to go to a different area or do some research on another place. So this is why I find Ted interesting, but it doesn't really get to the root of this video, which is what really is Ted, or who built Ted? Why is he driving around Tranzit, and why is he also carrying all of this sensitive information? Like I said, it's a bit of debate that has been left out of the timeline, but we can still do some speculation. Ted says he works for the Consolidated Coach Corporation bus line, and this is just a made-up company. We don't really know much about it, but he does drive civilians to different civilian areas, such as maybe the Santa Monica Pier or the Grand Canyon. So he drives civilians around, but he also drives important people to important places. We know he's mentioned he's gone to Groom Lake as well as the power facility.
Last call for Groom Lake. Abandoned power facility just ahead. What could go wrong?
As we learned from the timeline, both of these locations are actually Broken Arrow facilities. They keep the Avogadro down in the power facility, and Groom Lake was originally where Broken Arrow did much of their work. So here's what I think. Ted has two different modes, or at least robots like Ted have two different modes. There's a civilian mode, and there is a top secret, a classified mode. And for most civilians, they are riding around on the Consolidated Coach Corporation's bus line's automatic robot, and he's going to take them to a number of sites around the country, everywhere from Grand Central Station to the Grand Canyon, all sorts of cool places that one might want to go to. But they also have a different version of Ted that Broken Arrow uses, and this takes them to and from their various different research facilities around the world where they're doing different work. And I think that Ted was developed by Broken Arrow, but then they also used him in other ways, and just to sort of create an explanation for where Ted came from, they created the Consolidated Coach Corporation's bus line. So basically, the CCBL is a front for all of the work that Broken Arrow is doing, and it allows them to sort of keep their TED technology out in the public, but also away from its true original purpose while they use it for his true purpose. Either way, there's still much to learn about Ted, and despite being one of the biggest memes in the zombie storyline, he might actually be important, and he might know quite a bit that we would like to know. I think if we were actually able to dig into some of the quotes that Ted never actually told us, then there would be so much more to learn. Because if you listen to Ted's quotes, most of them aren't very important. He mentions cool, interesting places that you can then look up and learn about, but he doesn't actually dive into any secrets. But just imagine if he could. I imagine he does know a lot more than we might think. That's going to wrap things up for this video. I hope you found it interesting. Just wanted to take some time to talk about Ted because I still do find it fascinating that he was left off the timeline. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and bye.